I would have never heard my daughters. Is there anything to that? Is that legitimate? And it seems to me it shows that he was planning this at least a week ahead of time.
You're seeing a lot of puzzled looks up here because none of us have ever heard that. I've never seen that on social media. I confirmed just by the look on his face with Detective Baumover, we have never seen and nor heard of any such letter or its existence before. I'm sure that if it was in any way, shape, or form real, we would have heard about it.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So things are, I guess, happening in the post-truth phase of the Chris Watts case. Ronnie Watts, Chris Watts' father, has broken his silence. It's quite a rare event to hear Ronnie speaking out. Cindy has spoken out a couple of times, especially in the media, but it's quite rare that Ronnie has sort of stepped forward and sort of kind of made a statement. And so he did that, or I'm not sure exactly when it happened. It sounds like it's quite recent, but we certainly heard a 20-minute sort of question and answer thing going on between Chris Watts' father and the lady on the channel Revelation in the Reckoning. I do think that what is happening in the Watts case right now from the Watts side is kind of a big reaction to the Netflix documentary. The Netflix documentary was very Shanann focused. I don't want to say Shanann biased, just focused on Shanann. And I think this is kind of I don't want to say a backlash, but a kind of a response. It's kind of almost like the Watts side want to sort of provide their side of the story. I think they sort of feel like the focus has been on Shanann, the focus has been on how evil Chris Watts is or whatever. I'm just giving their perspective. I'm not saying they are right or wrong. I'm just saying that I think that is their response, is that they want to say, okay, well, there is another side to this. And someone made a really good point. I'm not going to say where I saw it, but someone made a really good point saying, when you sketch Shanann as this perfect person, absolutely angelic and perfect, then you are going to get kind of a counter narrative coming out of that in a situation like this. And I think there is something to that counter narrative because nobody is perfect. And I know I'm treading on very thin ice saying this, but if you give an authentic version of Shanann, someone just, this is what she was like, this is her backstory, etc., and it's kind of an honest story, then there is no grounds to make a counter narrative. To say, yes, but you weren't completely, there's this that you still need to talk about and that and all that kind of thing. Do you get what I'm saying? And by presenting a face of Shanann that is all good, I think it let me put it in another way, like in a completely neutral way. If two people are getting divorced, there's no murder, there's nothing like that. Two people are getting divorced, and this divorce sort of plays out on Facebook. And how it plays out is that the one person in the proceeding is completely good and completely innocent, and and the other one is completely bad. You're probably going to get a reaction too, to say, I may have made mistakes, but this, but that. Do you get what I'm talking about? Now, I do want to raise a couple of issues regarding the statement that Ronnie Watts made. I'm obviously not going to play anything from that. You can go to the channel if you like. I'll put links in my description to that if you haven't watched already. But there are a couple of things that I want to highlight. Before I do, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the first thing that I just wanted to check, just to satisfy myself, was the kind of big claim that Ronnie made, and it's the title kind of the title image, that I think Chris Watts had said to him that Shanann was evil while he was sitting in the cubicle. I think it was perhaps whispered to him or something like that. But it was when how I understand it, was when they had that sort of one-on-one. And according to Ronnie, that has been redacted. So possibly the sound has been removed, which definitely has been the case in certain areas of the discovery. And it shouldn't be a surprise, because whenever you open that document, it says redacted. And also the warrantless arrest affidavit was redacted, and also the second interview at Dodge County is also partially redacted. So we shouldn't be surprised that things are redacted. I do think it's interesting what he highlights here. So Ronnie is emphasizing, focusing on prioritizing, elevating this thing that he apparently said to Chris Watts had said to his father that she was evil, and then this has now been redacted. So just to be thorough, just to prepare for this video, I went to the discovery and I searched for the word evil in the discovery. And what is quite interesting is that, and this is, I guess, kind of funny, is evil comes up as part of the word Fayetteville and also Platteville. There's a EVIL in those words. And so there are 31 instances of evil, a lot of them in Fayetteville and Platteville. But to me, the part that is kind of interesting are the other references. Now, obviously, the one that Ronnie's talking about isn't here, but the one that is in the discovery is, I think, quite interesting. So I'll give an example. When Chris Watts was asked about, he was speaking to Coda, he said something like, I had nothing to do with this act of like evil cruelty, whatever has happened here, right? Because my love for these two girls and my wife, like blah, 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 blah. So he's describing the whole thing as evil cruelty. And I think regardless, I don't even think it's necessary to say this, but regardless of whether you think Chris Watts killed one person or three, including his unborn child 4, just what he did to his wife, and then also how he disposed of the bodies. Nobody else disposed of the bodies except him. If you're not going to call that evil and cruel and capricious, and then just the way that he acted normal, I'm not sure what would be a good way to describe it. I mean, he describes it that way himself. He describes himself being overcome by kind of a demon or something. So I don't think that's a bad description. And so for him, having done that, to use that word to describe Shanann, Shanann didn't commit a crime. I know he's trying to pretend that she did, or trying to present that she did, but calling a triple murderer, calling a housewife, whatever her faults and flaws, evil. It's not really a case of the pot calling the kettle black. It's a blackened pot, a soot stained pot, calling a saucer or a piece of china black. It's just not fair. It's not appropriate. I do think the other references are very interesting, and Shanann was a interesting personality. I don't really want to go into that here. I kind of more want to just deal with what was said in this latest episode. But if you go to Discovery page 2100, it's dealing with the phone data review. It is dealing with August the 4th. So this was 2 days before he went to visit his parents. The one day that he went to see his parents when he was in North Carolina, which is the 6th of August. And so on the 4th, Shanann texts him a really long thing. It's very, very long, and she sends it at 36 minutes past 3 in the morning, right, of August 4th. And it is really, really long. It is half a page of discovery, and then there are lots of text in response that go on for another almost a full page, to page 2101. Anyway, I'm just going to read the part dealing with evil. She writes, "You can believe I created this dagger, but I didn't do that. I stood up for our kids. I advocated and protected our children. I don't ever want to hear, 'I'm sorry I killed your kid because I was stupid.' That would kill me. These kids are my world, and I have to protect them from the evil of the world. I shouldn't have to protect them from evil family. Our kids deserve the same love and attention the other kids get, nothing less. I'm not accepting 'I'm sorry' from your mom, because she doesn't mean it and she knew what she was doing. I made it very clear not to eat it around Celeste, because she doesn't understand way before that happened. She's evil and willing to risk your daughter's life just to get under my skin." And so she goes on. She says, "There's nothing wrong with me and I'm not crazy. I just love my kids way too much." Anyway, in this short paragraph, she uses the word evil 3 times. And she uses this word to describe, I guess, his family, especially his mother. He calls them evil family. He says she's evil and talks about the evil of the world. And I wonder whether this didn't just trigger, this particular message didn't trigger Watts in a way, because, you know, he'd already tried to bring about a miscarriage and he was feeling evil brewing inside of him. And her calling his own family evil, regardless of what they did, I think anyone saying that to you is going to agitate you, especially somebody very close to you, calling your parents evil. I think it's going to agitate you, and I think it agitated them. So what I'm just trying to provide you is kind of a context around this word evil. And I did make a video some time ago called The Evolution of Evil. I personally don't like using a word like this in true crime. On the one hand, the reason is because it's obvious. It's certainly not, when somebody commits a crime, it's certainly not good, right? But the other reason why I don't like it is evil is relative. And this is an excellent example of that. To everybody, evil is from their perspective. And the law isn't like that. The law doesn't say, oh, well, you know what, I'm on that person's side, I'm team whatever, so from my perspective, that's evil. No. The law says, based on the evidence, based on this and that, and based on what that witness said, and based on the mosaic of evidence, and based on these arguments that were fielded, what has happened here, someone is either guilty or not guilty of a crime. And they never really talk about evil. They might talk about it in a holistic sense afterwards. And I think the judge in this case did. But personally, I don't think the words good and evil belong either in a courtroom or in true crime, simply because, as I say, it's relative and subjective. And as I say, if you look at what the victims might say are evil, or the victim's family, and what the perpetrator or the perpetrator's family might say are evil, it's kind of, you know, the whole thing with Chris Watts turning to God, and so now what is evil? He's forgiven himself. And so I'm just saying it's not a very good measure, because it's relative, it's subjective. And the law isn't. The law is based on evidence and facts, and a sort of a scientific look at reality. And evil isn't that. And calling Chris Watts evil doesn't really tell you anything about him, that you don't already know. Something that came out in the interview with Ronnie that I thought was quite interesting is this reference to the letter And I do think it's very interesting. That is why I played the clip at the beginning, where somebody references this letter that was written by Chris Watts. I believe it was written by him. It's dated the 6th of August. The writing does seem to match the sort of measured, modest, understated way that Chris Watts wrote. It's quite small letters. The numbers are bigger. And where he talks about if something happens to me or the children, look at my wife, investigate my wife. I do think that letter was written then. I do think it, like the person said, that it seems to suggest premeditation as early as a week before the time. And I also think it's very interesting that the district attorney claims to have no knowledge about it, Detective Baumhover, no knowledge about it. I'm not saying that they're hiding anything. I'm just saying that, the fact that they wouldn't know about this as late as the sentencing, which was November the 19th, when they'd been investigating it that long, does show, like you can kind of raise your eyebrows at that. You can sort of query that, I guess, in a sense. Why didn't they know about this? Another thing you could sort of ask is, why didn't the Watts family sort of present this either to the defense lawyers, Chris Watts' public defenders, or, I don't know, in some way make it part of a motion, make it part of the whole story. And, that could have been something they could have raised as why they wanted to appeal. Not appeal, why they wanted to contest the plea deal. Something else that's really interesting is that they felt, according to what he said, is that they didn't expect what the Powers lady, I think her name is Jean Powers, they didn't expect what she was going to say. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part is that as opposed as they were to what she was saying, they didn't say anything. I mean, that was their opportunity to say something. And now it's too late in a way. It's 2 years later. And in the same way that Chris Watts' parents sort of towed the line, and then now they want to, take action. So did Chris Watts. He towed the line, kind of taking the polygraph, doing the sermon on the porch, confessing again at Dodge Correctional, and now he sort of had a change of heart. And it just shows a kind of a mentality of doing as one's told, or doing as what's expected of you. And when you're in a courtroom, that is your opportunity. It's almost like when you're at a wedding and someone says, can anyone give any reason why this man shouldn't be blah blah blah. That is your opportunity to say something. And even in the case of the Watts wedding, there was an opportunity to say something, and they didn't attend instead. Can you imagine if they did attend and they objected there? I mean, Shanann would really have hated them, but it could have actually saved her life, kind of thing. So it is good to stand up and say what you feel. In in venues that are for that purpose. I'm not saying a wedding is for that purpose, but it kind of is. It kind of is. But a courtroom even more so. In a courtroom, it's a place where people make presentations and you can make your argument. And if there were any reservations about the plea deal, that would have been a good time to have said it. I think there would have been a lot of unhappiness from the district attorney, and kind of there would have been a big controversy in the courtroom, but that was an opportunity to say something. And the fact that they didn't is a mistake. And I don't know if you can correct it now. So a couple of other things I just want to highlight is in the 20-minute interview, there's absolutely no mention of Nicole Kessinger, and you'd think that is quite important. You'd think it's quite important to acknowledge the big part of Chris Watts' motive, not only that, also the financial situation, and there are absolutely no questions about that. And so I'm just going to go through some of the questions that do come up, that Ronnie responds to. Personally, I believe that Ronnie was aware of Nicole Kessinger before he went into the cubicle, because he didn't seem at all surprised. He didn't really ask about it. He didn't ask about her name. And you could say that is just Ronnie being Ronnie. I could be wrong, but you would think that something as big as that, in a scenario of you in a police station, and it now comes out for the first time that your son has cheated on his wife, you'd think, wow, who is this person? Where did you meet her? And there's nothing like that. There's just absolutely no mention of it. And that suggests prior knowledge. I could be wrong. There might not be prior knowledge. Might just be, we'll talk about this later, or something like that. And then did they? I mean, when Chris Watts was then incarcerated until the sentencing, why not talk about it then? So I don't know. I just find the fact that that's kind of excised out of that interview quite strange. There's something else I want to bring up, and that's also from the district attorney. It is during the news conference after the Watts sentencing, someone asked him a question about the plea deal, and he asked him a question about, was there, what happened in the first plea deal? And I think that is a very interesting question and a very interesting scenario. Listen to this.
The original plea deal isn't the one you guys reached today, correct? Can you elaborate on what that would have been?
To be clear, there was only one plea deal, and it's that's the one that his attorneys brought to us. The deal, for lack of a better word, and I frankly despise that word, no offense, the agreement that was reached was he would plead guilty to every count we charged him with. In exchange, if he pled guilty to each and every count in the complaint information, we would not seek the death penalty. That was an offer brought to us by the defense. That's when, I've talked about this before, Mr. Wren and I felt compelled to get on a plane and go see the Rusiks in North Carolina, because that was a conversation that I was only going to have with them face to face.
So what is interesting in that little that little monologue, is that nowhere does the district attorney say anything about when that happened. So, when was the plea deal brought up? And as I've mentioned a couple of times, it was actually brought up for the first time on the 26th of August, which is really, really early. It's, less than 2 weeks after the crime. It's 13 days after the crime. That's really, really early. And then also to keep the public in the dark about the plea deal, until, the 6th of November. So, for the entire month of September, the entire month of October. And then when the plea deal was announced in court, it caught a lot of people unawares, because no one was prepared for that. And you've got to ask, well, why was there all the secrecy around the plea deal? And I think the answer is quite obvious. Because if people had known, especially Watts's family and parents, and they would have sort of sniggered and laughed at the whole idea. So is the plea deal that you get to spend the rest of your life in jail? Well, that is what you'd get in the worst case scenario if it went to trial anyway. So what do you have to lose going to trial, right? In the 20-minute discussion with Ronnie, what I'm a little bit confused about is that he doesn't talk about also when the defense attorneys, the public defenders, came to see them in North Carolina. When was it? He talks about a hurricane, so I don't know, was it after the plea deal was announced, or was it after the 19th of November, or after the 6th of November? Was it between the 6th of November and the 19th? Or was it closer to August? When was it? Because I think that's quite important. I think it's important if they knew about it before the 6th of November. I think it's important if they knew about it, if the defense attorneys came to speak to them in November, and I think it's significant legally if they only came to see them after the sentencing, so after the 19th of November. I'd be interested to know the date, because legally that would matter. And I also think from the district attorney's perspective, in terms of the legal argument, the fact that the plea deal seemed to be in the offing as early as August 26th, I think one's got to ask them, why weren't you transparent about the plea deal? Especially if it was offered from the defense side. Why not just be transparent about it? And there might be some good reasons, such as, well, part of the plea deal is so that there is a lack of transparency to protect certain people. Maybe part of the defense side of things was, well, we want to protect Nicole Kessinger, we want to protect the Watts family or whatever. And maybe all of that has fallen away now because people have figured a lot of this stuff out anyway. So the thing that the plea deal was perhaps for, in other words, to cover over information, to conceal things, to do all that, has now been lost anyway. So what do you have to lose now in that respect? Do you see what I'm getting at? Just in general terms, the impression I got was that Chris Watts' father was rationalizing both the crime and the plea deal, it seemed to me, as PTSD, as post-traumatic stress disorder. And the implication with that is that Shanann was traumatizing or abusing him. But Chris Watts didn't seem very traumatized, including by his own actions during the sermon on the porch, did he? The person interviewing Ronnie works quite hard during the interview to cast the DA as the fly in the ointment. The DA lied about this and was dishonest about that, and wouldn't give the Watts family Chris's phone, and this and that and the next thing. Who is the real criminal here? Law enforcement? Did law enforcement kill Shanann? Did law enforcement kill the children? No. So, did law enforcement take a polygraph and fail it spectacularly? No. And there's also some whinging about Chris Watts going ahead with the second confession at Dodge Correctional, and like he didn't have a choice. Of course he had a choice. He had a choice all along to talk to the media, to talk to Coda that very first night, to talk to Tammy Lee during the first confession, during the polygraph, and he elected to choose to talk. He played his hand and lost in a spectacular gamble. He gambled and lost. And then he did the same thing at Dodge Correctional. You can't come afterwards and say, okay, let's play another game of poker. I was a bit naive. Let's try again. No, you were told what kind of the rules were. You gambled and you lost, kind of thing. So I do think that whole thing also that he was tricked with the audio. On the one hand, yes. On the one hand, you could say the law enforcement weren't completely transparent, and I'd agree that they weren't. But on the other hand, all prisoners know that what they say and the encounters inside prison can be recorded and are recorded. They know that. And this was also recorded, and what he didn't know was that falls within that same kind of thing. So they didn't really need his permission, because he's now a convicted felon. So they didn't really need his permission. So to argue about that is a little bit pointless. It's when Ronnie is asked what Watts spoke about when he visited them, and when he picked up Ronnie in the airport, he doesn't mention anything about Nicole Kessinger, as I mentioned. But he does say that Watts said, "I'd wished I'd gone to the Rockies game," and that stood out to him. And it's kind of interesting that even with that being said, Ronnie doesn't say why. Where did you go? You know. Another thing you could say with Ronnie is, and something that doesn't come up in this discussion is, why didn't you ask for a lawyer? And then he might say, well, I did. Well, yeah, but why didn't you insist? You know, Shanann talks about protecting family, right, in terms of her children. Ronnie was there to protect his son. He didn't know it, but he was. And so he could have. Why didn't he? Why didn't he insist on getting a lawyer? And one possibility is maybe the relationship at that point wasn't so good, and he was taking his cues to some extent from his son, or he wasn't sure what was going on. But the other thing, I think, is a personality thing. You don't want confrontation. And it would be a confrontation to say, hey, stop, let's stop here, we're going to get a lawyer. It's so easy to do, and would have kind of saved a lot of legal headaches. But they didn't do that. And then just a final thing that stood out to me is where Ronnie was saying that Watts just made something up when law enforcement visited him at Dodge Correctional, as you do. You know, the FBI come and see you. If you're in an awkward position, just make something up. When the FBI are talking to you and you're not quite sure what to say, just make something up. When the CBI are talking to you and you're not sure what to say, just make something up. When the lead detective is talking to you and you're not sure, just make something up. Yeah, I mean, if you're not sure, just make something up. Watts was cornered. What else could he do? Well, tell the truth. And if he didn't want to tell the truth, or felt he couldn't tell the truth, you've ambushed me here. This is not fair. Okay, well, no, I'm not going to talk to you. But he didn't. So, if you don't want to tell the truth, then you have the option of not saying anything. But he took the option of gambling, playing his cards and losing. Telling lies, trying to manipulate the process and losing. And I don't know if you can then blame the people who are asking these questions that they are at fault. Isn't the person at fault the person who is telling these stories in the first place? That are about, did you murder your family? How did you murder your family? Was it you murdered your family or Shanann? And in that thing, he said he did. Now, why would he if he didn't? Because that was what they wanted to hear. That is partially part of the answer, yes. But really, would you really tell someone something about a crime if you hadn't done it? So anyway, there's always the option of telling the truth, but given what Watts has done, it's not really surprising that he can't admit it. Something I'm not very clear about, again, is this timing of the visit to North Carolina. So hopefully that'll be cleared up. As I say, if this visit was before the plea deal, then I don't think they have much of a legal leg to stand on. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this video and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.